A man with long blonde hair, identified as Arthur, looks on with a serious expression while a small image of Pride remembers a conversation they had. She recalls that they were talking about Arthur himself. The scene flashes to a young girl, Tiara, looking up at the bespectacled Stale. She praises that guy, noting that even though he is 3 years younger than her, he is already smarter than half the adults around them. She also remembers that even as a small child, he was always trying to get stronger so he could protect his family and the people important to him. Arthur, listening nearby with a gentle expression, thinks to himself that it was amazing he actually accomplished it. Pride agrees with this sentiment, saying, "Yes, truly." Pride then introduces herself as Pride Royal Ivy, the first princess of the Frisia kingdom. She reveals that she is also the most wicked, cruel, and heretical last boss from a story. A memory shows people in a panic, calling out for Princess Pride. Pride explains that she remembered her past life when she turned 8 years old and realized she was in the world of an otome game she used to be addicted to, known as Our Ray of Light, or ORL. In that game's story, her character, Pride, inherited the throne, destroyed the country, and acted as the game's final boss. The game's plot is explained further, showing that the protagonist was Tiara, Pride's younger sister. Tiara's mission was to build trust with various capture targets, combine their strength, and ultimately defeat her older sister Pride. This is because the Frisia kingdom is a mysterious land where people are born with special abilities, and only the one with the most valuable ability, precognition, is able to inherit the throne. In the original game, Pride misused her power, tormenting the capture targets and delighting in any tragedies that occurred. Pride confirms that she is the last boss who is meant to be defeated. Determined, Pride stands under a wide sky, wondering how much she can actually resist the game's set story. She recalls a moment where she rushed to her father, stopping him from entering a carriage by yelling that one of the wheels was broken. She demanded that the guards check the wheels immediately, shocking them with her warning. She vowed to herself that she would not let these tragedies happen and that she would use all her might to stop them. She then remembers meeting Stale, who was introduced as her new adoptive brother and advisor. He is Stale Royal Ivy, one of the game's capture targets. He was a commoner adopted by the royal family because he possessed the special ability of teleportation, and he is 1 year younger than Pride. In the original game, Pride had tricked Stale into signing a slavery contract and treated him horribly. In this new timeline, however, Pride extended her hand to him, stating that they were family now and should get along, promising herself that she would not hurt Stale. Pride then introduces her younger sister, Tiara Royal Ivy, who inherited her mother's thoughtfulness and her father's kindness. Tiara had been kept a secret until she was 6 years old to protect her frail body from potential kidnappers and assassins. Upon meeting, Tiara shyly calls Pride Big Sister, causing Pride's heart to thump as she thinks Tiara is a true angel. Pride lists all the people precious to her in this life: her mother, the queen, and her father, the prince consort, as well as Stale and Tiara. She also cherishes her exclusive maids, Mari and La, the royal guard Jack, the entire Knight's Order, and Arthur, who has become her personal imperial knight. Pride feels that everyone is precious to her, and she wants to protect them all. The scene shifts to Prime Minister Gilbert and his wife Marianne, who are holding their newborn child. Pride and Arthur were chosen to be the baby's godparents. They decide on the name, Stella. Pride explains that she wanted the child to grow up to be like Tiara, while Arthur wanted her to grow up to be like Stale, so the name, Stella, was created to combine both of their wishes. Pride reflects on Prime Minister Gilbert. Using her game memories as a form of precognition, she knew that he had shady dealings and even overlooked human trafficking. He had done this to spread rumors about Pride's reputation and gain votes for his national powers registration bill. His actions were driven by desperation, as his fiancée, Maria, had collapsed from a strange illness, and he was searching for a cure. Pride's precognition revealed that Arthur Beresford possessed the power to cure all diseases. With this knowledge, and thanks to Stale's teleportation ability, they were able to find Maria and cure her completely. Despite this resolution, Pride notes that Stale still seems to hold a grudge against Gilbert for his past actions. In a flashback, Gilbert swears his loyalty to Pride. Standing before the woman he loves, Maria, he promises to continue protecting the country that Pride loves until the day his heart stops, swearing this vow here and now. Pride silently wishes for him to live happily alongside those he loves. Back in the present, Gilbert and his wife look down at their baby, Stella. Gilbert agrees that Stella is a wonderful name. He says that as parents, it would bring them no greater happiness than for their daughter to grow up with Princess Tiara's kindness and Prince Stale's intelligence. From a nearby doorway, Stale and Tiara are shown listening in, looking visibly moved by his words. Gilbert and Marianne cradle their child. Marianne expresses her gratitude, thanking Pride very much for such an excellent name. Gilbert adds that Stella will accept the name gratefully. The mood darkens dramatically as the scene changes to a rainy alley at night. A man, Val, is being violently dragged and beaten. He struggles against his attackers, cursing and yelling for them to stop. Inside a carriage, Tiara, Pride, and Stale are traveling. Tiara remarks that she's glad they could decide on a name, while Stale observes that it's much later than they expected. Pride says it doesn't matter, as they have no other plans and will be at the castle soon. The carriage suddenly clatters to a halt, and Pride asks what happened. A guard informs them that a vagrant has collapsed in their path and asks them to wait while they determine how to proceed. Another guard is seen yelling at the person on the ground to get up and let them go. Pride looks out the carriage window, questioning, "Vagrant?" She is visibly shocked when she recognizes the collapsed man and calls out, "Val." This triggers another memory, where Val is seen shouting, "Seef dash," as he grabs for a blonde woman lying in a bed. Pride's voice is heard giving Val an order to let go of her hand. In that memory, Val looks up in surprise to see Pride, Arthur, and Stale standing before him. Back in the present, Val is now in a room in the castle. Pride tells him to be at ease, explaining that his wounds were healed by a specialist but he still needs to rest. As she speaks, Val's body suddenly moves on its own, and he collapses to the floor with a thud. He grits his teeth and mutters that it's the slave contract forcing him to move. Pride explains that 4 years ago, Val was a survivor of a band of rogues that attacked the Knight's Order. As his punishment, he entered a contract of slavery with her, which makes him physically unable to betray or disobey her. Pride continues her explanation, telling Val he is in a room in the first aid wing of the castle and was carried there after collapsing in front of the castle gates. She recalls that in the original ORL game, a cliff collapse caused by Val's earth wall ability during that rogue attack had killed Roderick, the captain of the Knights and Arthur's father. However, they were able to avoid that tragedy by combining her precognition from game knowledge with Stale's teleportation ability. Val struggles to speak, forced by the contract. He says that he has come in accordance with Her Highness's orders. Pride realizes his arrival was not a coincidence and asks him why he was collapsed in such a place. She remembers the orders she gave him 4 years ago before his release. First, if he ever sensed a crisis, he was to use his power to protect her beloved sister, Tiara. And second, if he ever desperately needed someone's assistance, he was to come and see her. Understanding dawns on Pride, and she says that in other words, he needs help. Val immediately tries to dash away, but Pride commands him to halt. She asks why he feels the need to run when it's clear he needs help. She orders him not to move from that spot and says she will overlook his disrespect if he obeys. Val visibly tenses, clenching his hand as he resists the urge to flee. He yells, "Damn," and insists he doesn't need her help, claiming he was only dragged there because of the slavery contract. He scoffs that he would never ask a favor from snotty nobles. Pride, standing with Tiara, Arthur, and Stale behind her, remains calm and says, "Then, Val, tell us what you wish." She orders him to tell them what it is he truly wants. Val hesitates, struggling with himself, before finally choking out the words, "Save them." He then shouts, "Save those brats." Pride questions him, "Brats?" Val explains that 2 kids from the lower class were captured by human traffickers. The traffickers offered him a trade, the 2 kids for 5 more kids, including Val himself, to be exchanged at dusk after 2 days. He says he passed out the next day at noon and has no idea how much time has passed since. Pride thinks to herself that 2 days have passed. She realizes that Val wasn't at the gates that morning when they left for their inspection, which means the deadline must be tomorrow. She knows that due to the contract, Val cannot commit any crimes, which includes asking others to commit them, making it impossible for him to save the children on his own. Val sarcastically asks if the generous princess will give him 5 replacement children or just give him permission to kill the traffickers for 1 day. Pride flatly refuses and informs him that he will be placed under house arrest for the night. Val explodes, yelling, "What?" and asking what the big idea is. He reminds her that the deadline is tomorrow and that there would be nothing he could do even if she did release him. He accuses her of this being just another part of his punishment and screams, "Monster!" Ignoring his outburst, Pride turns away and calls for Arthur and Stale. Stale steps forward, placing a hand on Arthur's arm, and states that they are at the command of Her Highness, the first Princess Pride. Pride then turns back to Val and gives him a new order. She tells him he will be resting there tonight and that she will have him recover. She commands his cooperation and orders him to tell them every piece of information he has about the traffickers, declaring that they will be saving them. With a look of absolute determination, Pride states that they will be taking back her citizens and his cherished friends. Pride is having a vision where she is holding a dagger, telling Tiara to listen and instructing her to use it if a certain situation ever arises. Pride, looking somber in the vision, sees Tiara looking desperate and thinking that there must be another way. Pride recognizes this vision is of Tiara, the game's protagonist, and wonders why her dear younger sister is crying. The vision continues with Tiara in tears, thinking it would be fine to just run away. Pride understands that this is the final stage of the game. It is the specific route where Tiara must make a final stand all by herself in order to protect the citizens and another person. Pride feels a wave of guilt, mentally apologizing to Tiara for having to go through this. In the vision, Tiara is seen sobbing in front of a dark, menacing figure as someone weakly calls out for, says Pride. Pride suddenly gasps and jolts awake, her face covered in tears, as someone calls out, "Princess Pride." She looks confused, her throat feeling tight, and apologizes to Arthur, Stale, and Tiara, asking if she fell asleep. Stale confirms she did, reminding her that they were right in the middle of planning the rescue operation. He then looks over and notices that Tiara is also upset. Pride looks down with concern at Tiara, who is huddled on the floor and crying as well. Tiara then suddenly lunges forward, clinging to Pride and crying out, "Big sister." Stale looks surprised, asking what happened to both of them, as he can see that Pride is also crying. Gilbert approaches Pride, who is now comforting Tiara on her lap, and apologizes for worrying her. He wonders if the two sisters have been pushing themselves too hard and reassures them that much of the planning is already complete. Tiara, in a brief panic, realizes she's on her sister's lap and worries about her dress, but Pride calms her, saying it's all right. Tiara mentions that she feels like she also had a dream but can't remember it, and Gilbert kindly suggests it must have been a bad dream. Pride, recovering, changes the subject and asks Gilbert to remind her who provided them with their information. Gilbert smiles back and begins to answer, while Stale is visible behind him looking slightly confused. The scene flashes back to Gilbert, disguised in a cloak, speaking with Stale. Gilbert mentions that it feels strange to call the first prince by that title. Stale tells him not to worry about such trivial matters, adding that Arthur calls him that as well. He does, however, warn Gilbert not to call for him unless it's a case of extreme necessity. Stale then prepares to leave, saying he will hide nearby and telling Gilbert to call him when he's finished after giving a signal. Gilbert clarifies with a smile, confirming that it's fine to call for Stale whenever he is strictly needed. Stale, looking impatient, just tells him to hurry up and do what he needs to. Gilbert then descends a set of stone stairs, noting to himself that it has been a while since he last visited this particular store. Inside, a man with a headband named Vale greets Gilbert, apologizing that they are still in the middle of preparations. Gilbert pulls down his hood and says it has been quite a while, Vale. Vale, wearing dark glasses, remarks that Gilbert's face has softened and gotten a lot nicer since the last time he saw him. He adds that he heard this country's prime minister had changed, but he supposes it's still Gilbert, Mr. Bigwig. Gilbert explains that putting human trafficking organizations out of business is part of his main job, and as a result, Vale's establishment has been raking in money. Vale quickly insists that he's just the middleman and isn't involved in the actual buying or selling. Gilbert reminds him that the only reason he was overlooked was to allow him to gather information. Vale asks if this means Gilbert wants to buy more information, though he quickly adds that he already vowed not to commit any more crimes. Gilbert replies, "Of course not." He leans forward, stating that he would be glad to receive any information provided by a good, upstanding citizen. He then smiles, telling Vale it's not as if he hates him, and that he would like for them to continue this cooperative relationship. Vale just sighs, rubbing his head in exasperation. Back in the present, Prime Minister Gilbert reassures Pride, telling her not to worry and that their informant is an upstanding citizen. He then pats his own face, worrying that he'll scare his lovely daughter Stella because his face looks like some kind of demon lord, despite him just becoming a father. He instructs Stale to call for him when it's time to see the criminal, Val, and announces that it's almost time for dinner, so they should return to the royal palace, which Pride agrees to. Pride, Arthur, Tiara, and Stale stand together with determined expressions. They go to Val's room, finding him sitting casually on the floor. He greets them with a yo, and gestures around the damaged room, asking if the bleak space doesn't look a lot better now. He smirks, adding that the princess herself told him he could do whatever he wanted in there. Pride walks forward and drops a basket of food, ordering him to eat this. She warns him that she will not tolerate him disposing of it or wasting it. A small version of Pride thinks to herself that she should have also ordered him not to wreck the place. Val immediately throws a piece of food hard against the wall, where it thuds and cracks. He casually licks his fingers, saying, my bad, and claiming he thought he saw a bug. Arthur looks annoyed that he couldn't react in time, while Stale holds Tiara back. Stale steps forward, addressing Val as criminal, and reminding him that both he and Tiara also have the authority to give him commands. Val cuts him off by obnoxiously chomping and slurping the food, taunting them by asking if the elegant princess can't stand to see it. Pride calmly remarks that Val has a good arm, but that his skill is useless because of their contract. She correctly assesses that he is just trying to provoke them. Val yells that he doesn't need their help, but Pride remains unfazed. She states that it's no use trying to anger them, she won't let him out until tomorrow, and they need him fully prepared to save the children. Tiara then steps forward and asks Val if he doesn't feel the need to save those 2 children. Val quietly admits, I do, but adds that he just doesn't need their help. Tiara, looking heartbroken, asks if those children aren't precious to him. This angers Val, who shouts, huh? And insists those brats aren't precious to him at all. Tiara, confused, asks if he wasn't worried about them and why he wants to save them. Val denies being worried, claiming it's because he needs them so he can live comfortably. Pride interprets his words, suggesting he means he's taking advantage of the children because he can't move freely under the slave contract. Tiara presses him again, asking what the 2 children mean to him. Val grabs his shirt, describing them as some brats who annoy me to death. A flashback shows 2 small children, a girl named Sifek and a boy named Kemet. Val angrily says that for the last 4 years, they always clung to him, no matter how many times he drove them away, and he's wanted to kill them many times. He clutches his chest, saying that just remembering it makes him sick. He tells the princess to get out, yelling that blessed people should live quietly in their own blessed world and that, you spoiled brats disgust me. Tiara looks devastated. Stale suggests to Pride that their work is done and they should rest. Pride asks Stale and Arthur to take care of Tiara, deciding that she will be staying just a little longer. In the throne room, Gilbert briefs the queen. He requests to mobilize the Knight's Order to rescue the captive citizens and destroy the enemy stronghold. He reports that the base is just outside the country and they must act tomorrow before the traffickers can defect to another country. The prince consort notes the situation is urgent. The queen permits it, ordering units to be formed for immediate dispatch. She commands them to rescue the citizens and destroy the organization, adding that she has faith in Gilbert's plan. Elsewhere, Stale worries if his big sister is all right. Arthur reassures Tiara that her elder sister will be fine, as Val is bound by the contract. He reminds her that Pride is strong and that he and Stale are there for her. Stale then asks Tiara why she was so concerned for Val. Tiara admits she's not sure, but ever since Val said he needed help, just seeing him makes her chest hurt. Stale reflects that Tiara is sensitive to the true nature of people and that if she feels that way, there might be more to Val. Tiara continues, saying Val looked like he was in pain, despite his harsh words. Stale points out that Val only spoke of taking advantage of the children. Tiara says she just wanted to hear him out but feels frustrated that she couldn't do anything. She feels she isn't reliable like her sister and that all she can do is wait. She cries, feeling as useless as she did during past crises. She says it's frustrating because she wants to protect her big sister too, but feels she can barely even snuggle with her. She doesn't want to regret being unable to do anything, feeling her time with everyone is running out. A hand reaches out to her, and Stale comforts her. He tells Tiara she is already supporting her elder sister, just as he and Arthur do, and that they are always thinking of her. Arthur joins them, smiling, and says it's okay. He confirms they are all thinking about how to protect both her and Princess Pride. He adds that it's not just them and that this time, they will have other trusted people with them, as images of other knights appear. Tara, looking resolute, says yes, and asks them to please protect her big sister and to save Val. The operation begins at a ruined stronghold. One large trafficker notes Val came and reminds him the trade was for 5 people. Another shouts that there are only 4 people there. As the ground begins to rumble and crack, the traffickers yell in shock. Val stands confidently, declaring, "The fifth one is me." He reveals, "I'm a specialist," and orders them to hurry up and bring the two brats as the plan gets underway. A large, rattling bag is shown in the foreground, while in the background, a group of captured children are huddled together in fear. The bag continues to rattle as it is moved. The scene shifts to show a man with long, light hair named Gilbert, who is tied up and shuffling on his knees near the bags. He looks concerned and asks if is okay. From inside one of the bags, a woman's voice, belonging to Jean, confirms that she is fine. Nearby, a dark-haired boy named Arthur is hiding and warns Gilbert not to let their captors lay a finger on his elder sister. Arthur glares intensely, vowing to remember the face of the man who threw his sister into the bag. Elsewhere, a man named Stale, using the alias Philip, checks on another man named Val, reporting that Val has passed out but doesn't appear to be hurt. Arthur then speaks to Gilbert, calling him, "Hey, Gil," and tells him to protect his sister as well. Gilbert is inwardly delighted, thinking to himself that the day has finally come when the young prince, Arthur, would call him by that name. It is revealed that this is all part of a plan. They have intentionally taken the forms of children to be traded as hostages by Val, which will lead them to the enemy's base. To maintain their cover, Prime Minister Gilbert is called Gil, Stale is using his friend's name, Philip, and the narrator, Jean, is called Jean. The plan involved Prime Minister Gilbert using his special age manipulation ability. He changed Jean from 15 to 11 years old, himself from an adult into a 13-year-old, and Stale from 14 to 10 years old, making them all 4 years younger. Back in the present, their carriage stops with a clack, and they prepare for the plan to commence. A captor opens the carriage door, holding 2 batons, and yells, "All right, you brats." The carriage is shown parked at the entrance of a large, dark cave. A bald man wearing a face mask orders them to get into their cage quietly, but he pauses in confusion, saying, realizing something is wrong. The man is shocked and yells, "Hey, brat," as he sees the children are no longer tied up, demanding to know who undid their ropes. He stomps forward angrily, complaining about who tied the ropes so badly. He tells Arthur to get over here and reaches out to grab his wrist. In that instant, Arthur vanishes with a whoosh, leaving the other captive children confused about where he went. The captor is stunned as Arthur reappears behind him. Then, Gil and Jean also vanish and reappear in their adult forms. Another guard opens the door, angrily asking who left it open, only to be shocked by the sight of the transformed adults. The now-adult Gilbert calmly addresses the fools, stating that they will now tell them the whole truth, as the guards look on in terror. The scene switches to a prison, where a guard named Alan walks with Stale, now in his adult form. Stale asks Alan if this is the right place, mentioning that Prime Minister Gilbert said important witnesses would be here. Alan, who resembles the adult Arthur, confirms that's what he heard. Suddenly, the bald captor lands in the cell in front of them with a thud, groaning that it hurt and wondering where he is. Moments later, the second guard also falls into the cell with a Jaya, startling Stale and Alan. The bald guard grabs the cell bars, yelling "Bars?" and "Where am I?" Stale and Gilbert, also in his adult form, stand outside the cell, with Gilbert remarking that these captives will now tell them the location of their base. More people, the other captives from the background, begin falling into the cell, crying out in pain and confusion. They chatter nervously, asking where they are. Alan, the guard, notes that Gilbert did say there would be more than one of them. Back in the carriage, Jean wakes up in her child form with a gasp, "Thanky, Philip." Philip, Stale, and Gilbert, also in their child forms, are with her. Gil stands up and comments that the plan seems to be going well. Gil, still as a child, tells Jean to be careful. He explains that from now on, the 3 of them, Gil, Jean, and Arthur, will stay together, while Stale, as Philip, and Val move separately. Their immediate goal is to free Kemet and Sifek from the high-grade cell. Gil explains that the traffickers classify their captives. Those with special abilities are high-grade, and those with rare or excellent abilities are special grade and kept in cages. Jean watches as Gil and Arthur walk towards the cave entrance, and she prays for their safety. She reflects on a fortunate miscalculation. Even when Gilbert uses his ability to change someone's age, the power level of that person's own special ability remains unchanged. Soon after, the 3 of them are thrown into a dark cell with a clatter. Inside the cell, Gil asks Jean if she is okay or injured, and she confirms she is fine. They are imprisoned with other children who look very thin, and Jean deduces they aren't fed enough because they are considered lower class. A guard outside complains about his terrible day, grumbling that most of the captives escaped because someone left a door open and that the brats remaining have no special abilities. Jean observes the situation, thinking they must wait for their chance. Jean gently approaches a small, frightened child, asking if they are okay, but the child only shrieks, "Eek." Jean apologizes for scaring them and asks how long they have been there. The child, who is very scared, says they don't know. Jean understands, realizing it must be hard to track time in a dark place with no outside light. Another child begins to cry for their mom. This makes Jean think of Arthur, remembering that he has a special ability to heal those who are sick. Meanwhile, Gil is busy gathering information from the adult prisoners in the cell. The crying intensifies as more children begin to sob for their parents. Jean worries that her attempt to comfort them only reminded them of their fear. A guard angrily rattles the bars and shouts at the brats to shut up and behave. He threatens to dispose of them before they can even be sold. The guard then focuses on Jean, calling her the red-haired brat. He warns her to be quiet if she doesn't want to become damaged goods. Another guard laughs, mocking that she has no charm and wondering if they can even sell her. Although Jean recognizes she was just insulted, she thinks to herself that the two people behind her, Gil and Arthur, are far more terrifying than these guards. Nearby, a child named Val starts to sniffle. Jean quickly puts a finger to her lips, quietly telling him it's okay but that they must stay quiet. As she looks across the dark cell, Jean suddenly becomes confused. She spots two more children huddled against the far wall and wonders why. She recognizes them as Kemet and Sifek, the very two people they were searching for, and she questions why they are in this lower-class cell with them. Val's plan, which was to save two specific children identified as specialists, while others would wait in intermediate-grade cells. Val and Stale intended to first rescue those in the high-grade cells and the special-grade cells. The scene then shows Stale and Val at the high-grade cells, but Stale is enraged and slams his fist against the bars because their targets are not there. Val, standing behind him, urges him to be quiet so he doesn't attract the guards. As Stale wonders if the specialists are in the special-grade cells instead, Val turns to another prisoner and offers his hand through the bars, promising them they will be able to return to their country. Stale is shown sweating with frustration as he realizes that if Kemet was put in a lower-grade cell, Sifek would certainly be there with him. This is a problem because Kemet had hidden the fact that Sifek has a special ability to create water. Elsewhere, other characters decide to stick to their current plan, believing Kemet and Sifek are now likely in the same location as Pride and Arthur. Back in the prison, the person Val spoke to points toward the very back of the cave, explaining that there is a hidden hole near the last cage where a rare specialist would be kept. Stale then tosses a sword to Val, telling him he borrowed it from the armory, and instructs Val to stay behind and create a loud distraction. Val accepts the order from his prince, as the scene changes to Pride and Arthur, who have located two children, Sifek and Kemet. Sifek looks at them suspiciously as Pride approaches, telling them it's okay. Pride introduces herself as one of Val's friends, but Sifek immediately scoffs, stating bluntly that Val doesn't have any friends. Before Pride can fully explain that Val told them about her, Sifek draws a sharp blade and holds it menacingly to Pride's throat. Sifek angrily accuses them of lying and demands to know if Val got caught, calling him a moron for thinking they could be rescued. Pride, though stunned, quickly clarifies that Val is fine and asks if Sifek would answer their questions. Pride explains they heard from Val that Sifek has a special ability and asks why she is in this particular cell. Sifek blushes slightly, calling Val a blabbermouth, and explains that she is Kemet's older sister and couldn't bear to leave him alone, so she hid her ability because Kemet wouldn't want them to be separated. Pride realizes Sifek is only in this cell because she chose to stay with her brother, but Sifek misunderstands the conversation and suddenly stands up, newly convinced that Val really was captured. Kemet then shouts that they must go save him. Arthur tries to correct them, explaining that Val is actually safe and searching the high-grade cell area, but their argument is interrupted by a guard who rattles the cell bars and yells at the brats for being too loud. As the guard continues to shout that even newbies must follow the rules, a loud boom echoes through the cavern, startling him. The entire cave begins to rumble and crumble, and Sifek and Kemet look around in confusion, wondering what is happening. Pride, however, looks up with recognition, understanding that this commotion is the signal from Stale and Val. In another area, guards begin to panic, with one shouting that the high-grade cell has been raided and another reporting that someone has blocked the entrance and is holding their valuable product hostage, lamenting how much money they will lose. Pride realizes that Sifek and Kemet still mistakenly believe Val was captured and is in that high-grade cell. As Kemet starts to tell his sister where Val really is, a guard grabs him by the shirt and demands to know what he's trying to do. Seeing her brother threatened, Sifeka's eyes widen in anger. In an instant, the guard grunts in pain as a powerful spurt of water blasts him off his feet. Pride and Arthur watch, impressed, with one remarking that while Val mentioned Sifeka's water ability, they never imagined it was this strong. The force of the blast knocked the cell door open, and Sifek and Kemet stand in the doorway while the guard lies stunned on the ground. Sifek firmly takes Kemet's hand, and they walk out of the open cell. She internally vows that she will live and that the three of them, herself, Kemet, and Val, will survive together. With fierce determination, she resolves that their captors must give Val back to them. As Sifek and Kemet begin to run toward the exit, Pride watches them go and tells her companion to leave this to her. The story ends on a powerful note of Sifeka's rage, as she promises she will never forgive anyone who dares to hurt Val. Arthur, who is holding a torch as he steps into a hidden tunnel, noting that it wasn't very deep. His ear twitches as he hears the sounds of someone sobbing just ahead. He cautiously peeks around the corner, asking if anyone is there. He discovers a person with light-colored hair lying face down, their entire body tightly bound by ropes. The captive weakly asks who it is. Arthur sees that it's a young boy, and judging by his face, he figures the boy is about 14 years old, the same age as himself. Arthur immediately runs toward him, torch in hand, announcing that he has come to save him and will get him out of there right now. As Arthur crouches down to untie the boy, he asks about a strange light he sees. The boy, who is sitting up and wearing a blindfold, explains that it is his special ability. Arthur inwardly observes that such an intense light would surely be treated as a high-grade ability. The boy introduces himself as Philip, but then quickly says no as he lifts his hand to remove his blindfold. After taking it off, he reveals his eyes and corrects himself, stating his name is Powell. Now freed, the two boys sit facing each other in the dim cave. Arthur smiles and tells Powell it's nice to meet him, assuring him that everything will be okay now and that he will return him to his home. At this, Powell reacts with distress, and bright sparks begin to crackle around his head as he shouts no. The energy intensifies, and Powell yells that he is not going back. Suddenly, Powell's special ability of light erupts violently, forcing Arthur to flinch back as he feels the intense heat. Powell clutches his head, screaming that he never wanted this kind of special ability. Arthur, shielding his singed face, recognizes that Powell is about to burst into flames and calls out his name, identifying him as a specialist and a citizen of Phrygia. Arthur asks where he doesn't want to return to, suggesting he could just run away somewhere else. Powell cries out in anguish that there is nowhere else he can go, a fact Arthur grimly realizes is true. Specialists are unique to Phrygia and are not understood by other nations. They are forbidden from even visiting other countries without royal permission. If he lost his place in his home country, he would truly have nowhere else to go. Powell screams that he only brings misery to everyone and was cut off from everything. With tears streaming down his face, he demands to know what he did wrong, shouting that all he did was just want to live. The scene shifts to Arthur, now sitting outside the tunnel looking exhausted, his face covered in soot. Val walks up to him with a grin, calling him Your Highness, and remarking that he was late. Val casually asks if the guy in there got angry. Arthur quietly replies no, but mentions that it seemed like something real crazy had been thrown in there. He then looks up at Val, asking if he knew who was in the tunnel the whole time. Val just smiles, mentioning that the guards on the other side had started making a racket for some reason. Arthur, looking down, changes the subject, asking Val about something from 4 years ago. Why did he wish for the contract of slavery? Arthur insists he has no time and needs a short answer. Val turns his head, his expression serious, and replies that it's because everything is over when you're dead. This statement resonates with Powell's desperate cry about just wanting to live. A flashback shows Arthur and Pride, as Arthur recalls entering a contract of subordination with his elder sister when he was adopted at 7. Back in the present, Arthur tells Val to keep watch while he goes back into the tunnel. When Val suggests he could just abandon the prisoner without his princess knowing, Arthur cuts him off, stating he can't do that because it would be a betrayal of his elder sister. He stands and declares that even without the contract, everything he is belongs to his elder sister, before heading back into the cave. Arthur returns to Powell, who is still sitting on the ground, crackling with energy. Powell looks up, startled as Arthur sits down, confirming he's okay. Powell, full of shame, apologizes for his outburst, especially toward Arthur who came to rescue him. Arthur tells him not to worry about it, saying something else is more important. He then firmly states that he will be returning Powell to the kingdom of Frisia. Powell recoils in shock, telling Arthur to stay away. Arthur reflects that he must have looked at Pride with that same look of rejection when they first met. Arthur acknowledges that Frisia must be a difficult place for Powell to live right now, admitting the country is still imperfect and that other nations don't understand specialists. He asks Powell to wait a little longer, promising that in a few years, Frisia will become the best place in the world for him to live. Powell angrily demands how he can be so sure. Arthur replies with confidence that it's because Frisia has the first princess Pride. He explains that when Pride becomes queen, the country will change for the better. He now understands this is why Pride reached out her hand to Val, to give another chance to someone from their land. Arthur then extends his own hand, smiling kindly, and says he will take Powell's hand without hesitation, just as Pride did. Powell, stunned, can only ask if he really means it. Arthur asks Powell to wait in their country until Pride becomes queen, vowing that if Powell still feels he has no place then, Arthur himself will find one for him. Powell, with tears in his eyes, asks why Arthur would go so far for him. Arthur explains it's because he knows someone who will always reach out a helping hand, regardless of status or record, and that he himself was one of those people she saved. Powell, as a beloved citizen, is the same. Arthur reaches out and promises that as long as he lives, he will work to keep smiles on the faces of Powell and his loved ones. Overwhelmed, Powell breaks down in tears. Later, Arthur is shown alone in the tunnel once more. He sighs, admitting he was just borrowing Pride's words when he promised to work hard for everyone's smiles. He had teleported Powell to the outskirts of a town he knew, not to the Knight's Order. He thinks he must hurry back to Pride, who is waiting, and follow the plan to protect her. As he stands, he suddenly sways and collapses to the ground. His consciousness fades as he whispers Pride's name. Pride's group in the prison cell, where Pride sits and worries because Stale and Val have not yet returned. She notes that it has been a while since the signal was given, and she begins to fear that her selfishness has caused something terrible to happen to Stale or Philip. Another person in the cell tries to comfort her, whispering that everything will be all right. At the same time, Sifek and Kemet are running through a cavern passageway. Kemet tells his sister that the boy said their destination was just ahead. Sifek smiles confidently, believing that in this country, his plan is perfect and they will be safe. Elsewhere, at the cave entrance, Val struggles to hold a rock barricade steady as guards on the other side try to break through. The guards shout for more bombs to clear the blockade. Val grunts that the barrier won't hold for much longer and wonders how long the prince, Arthur, is planning to take. Arthur is shown walking away from the entrance, remembering Val's instruction to simply stand watch. The guards outside then detonate a powerful bomb, causing a massive explosion that blasts the barricade apart. The force throws Val to the ground, and he groans that he still needs to check on the brats. Before he can get up, an angry guard grabs him by the hair, demanding to know where he hid the special grade kid. As the guard snarls that Val isn't going anywhere, he pulls out a knife and holds it threateningly toward Val's face. Suddenly, a powerful torrent of water blasts through the area, catching all the guards by surprise and sending them flying. Sifek is seen looking back, her eyes filled with rage as she holds onto Kemet. Sifek and Kemet begin to run, and Sifek shouts a warning to the guards not to lay a single finger on Val. Their escape is suddenly blocked by the arrival of Captain Allen and a group of knights. Allen spots Arthur and immediately demands to know what he is doing there, questioning why he isn't at the Prime Minister's residence with Pride where he is supposed to be. Arthur begins to panic, desperately trying to think of a distraction. He points further into the cave, warning Allen that there are more criminals up ahead where people precious to him are located. He silently worries that if the knights see Pride's face, his entire plan will be exposed. In a stroke of luck, Captain Allen suddenly points and recognizes Sifek, shouting the name Jean, and explaining she is the child of an acquaintance. Arthur seizes this chance and runs past the knights, begging them all to just call her Jean as he rushes toward the now-blocked entrance. Nearby, Pride hears the sound of gunshots. She peeks around a corner and realizes she has reached the high-grade area where Stale's group was supposed to be. She sees Captain Allen standing in an opening looking into a wider chamber. Her eyes widen in horror as she sees the scene inside. Several bodies are on the ground, and a guard is holding a pistol. She spots Arthur lying face down, and she also recognizes Prime Minister Gilbert, who is clutching an injured shoulder. Pride then sees Stale and Val among the captives. Arthur, still on the ground, subtly slides his sword across the floor toward her. She quietly retrieves the weapon and exchanges a determined look with Stale, who instructs her to go forth. Pride affirms, "At your will," and instantly dashes into the room. She moves so fast the guards are startled, and in a flash, a guard's arm is severed and flies through the air as he screams in pain. Prime Minister Gilbert looks up from the ground and cries out for Sir Arthur. One of Alan's knights then gives the order to charge and kill the enemies. The knights rush in, and a chaotic sword fight erupts against the guards. Pride herself breathes heavily as she darts through the battle, efficiently slicing down multiple guards who scream as they fall. She clashes blades with one enemy, stabs another, and spins to cut down a third. After the brief but brutal fight, Pride and Stale stand among the defeated guards. One last guard, breathing heavily, manages to raise his pistol. He aims it at Pride, calling her a brat, and screaming for her to die. Before he can pull the trigger, another figure slices him, and at the same moment, a gunshot echoes from a different direction. The guard cries out as he is hit. Pride peeks out from behind cover, catching her breath. Suddenly, Prime Minister Gilbert shouts a warning to Sir Arthur, telling him to watch his feet. Chains burst from the ground and rattle, wrapping around Arthur's leg just as he tries to jump away. Pride realizes this must be the chain specialist. She looks confused, wondering if the person she just defeated wasn't the specialist after all. A new, masked enemy appears, grinning as the chains rattle around him, his true identity a mystery. The true chain specialist, a man with a prominent scar, having captured Val. Val is seen struggling as chains are wrapped tightly around his body and neck, causing him to grunt in pain. From the cavern floor, Pride, Captain Alan, and the others look up at the dire situation. The injured Prime Minister Gilbert recognizes the captor, noting that he was one of the 5 people who appeared at the exchange. The specialist smirks at Pride, who is holding her sword, and orders her to throw it away. A brief flashback reveals the specialist confirming that the large, masked man was just a cover and musing that it was no wonder Vale couldn't find his name. Back in the present, he tightens the chains on Val, causing him to choke, and warns Pride to put her sword down or Val will be the first to die. Pride immediately complies, dropping her sword, which clatters onto the stone ground as she stops moving. The specialist then activates his power again, sending new chains bursting from the ground to ensnare Stale. Captain Alan looks on in shock, calling Stale an idiot for getting caught. The specialist laughs as Stale groans in pain from the rattling chains binding him, mocking him for pushing himself and telling him not to be in such a hurry to die. Despite being forced to his knees, Stale glares back, insisting he is just fine. He declares that his role is to act as a wall for Princess Pride and the others, and he will continue to stand as a knight. With a powerful shout, Stale summons his strength and shatters the chains all around him. The specialist is left completely stunned by this display, muttering, "Huh," in disbelief. Pride then steps forward, her expression cold and intimidating as she addresses him as a lowly rogue and demands to know what he thinks he is doing to her citizens. The terrified specialist yells that she must be kidding and hurls a piece of debris at her, startling the still-bound Val. Pride, now holding her sword again, calmly remarks how lackluster he is and effortlessly slashes and deflects the barrage of chains he shoots at her. The specialist, in a panic, fires a gun at her, but Pride thinks to herself that the last boss queen inside her is smiling and that she can see all his movements with her recognition ability. The specialist is shocked that she is unharmed and screams in frustration. He desperately fires his gun over and over, screaming for her to stay away, as Pride calmly deflects every single bullet with her sword. The specialist's bravado crumbles, and he begins to back away, groaning and pathetically calling for someone to help him. He falls to the ground, waving his arms in terror as he calls her a monster. Pride looks down on him and states that it's a shame, as the fact that he possesses a special ability marks him as a citizen of Frisia. The trembling specialist pulls out a knife, threatening to stab her to death if she comes near him. Pride informs him that she will not be the one to kill him, at least not with her own hands. She then announces that the Queen of Frisia, Rosa Royal Ivy, has given an order to destroy this organization. Pride turns to Captain Alan and commands him to dispose of the man. Alan immediately acknowledges the order and, in a swift motion, slashes the specialist with his sword. Blood gushes from the wound and Alan, with his sword now bloody, turns his attention to Sifek, addressing her as Lady Jean. A mysterious figure with shaggy hair is seen looking down from above, just as the scene returns to the cavern below. With their real leader now defeated, The remaining members of the criminal organization are being rounded up and defeated smoothly by the knights. Captain Allen is shouting orders, telling his troops to protect any captives they find and to ensure not a single enemy remains, while also ordering a complete search of the rest of the cave. The injured Prime Minister Gilbert thanks Arthur, calling him Gil, as Allen calls out to Sifek, addressing her as Jean. Pride reports to Captain Allen that Sifek and Kemet are fine, explaining that they were able to meet up with the knights and were entrusted to their care. Her report is suddenly interrupted by a loud bang and a violent rumbling as the entire cave begins to shake and collapse. Captain Allen looks up in shock, wondering if it's a new enemy attack and how they could possibly have so much power left. He immediately changes plans, ordering everyone to calm down and begin a temporary retreat, telling his troops to coordinate and find anyone who still needs to be rescued. Allen questions if there are truly any more captives left, noting that Val had supposedly made sure to rescue every last one. Val himself then shouts to the captain, directing the knights to help the injured and support them as needed. As the cave continues to rumble, a knight runs up to Allen, reporting that the rescue team has successfully met up with the 3rd Division team. Allen is relieved, thinking all that's left is to escape. However, another knight reports that they've received word that 2 of the children left in their care, 1 girl and 1 boy both under 10, have jumped back into the cave. The report also mentions it seemed they used a water-based special ability to escape their rescuers. Hearing this, Val throws his head back and lets out a furious scream, realizing those stupid brats, Sifek and Kemet, have returned. Just then, Pride, Val, and the knights see Sifek running toward them from a collapsing tunnel. She is alone. Val rushes to her, and she grabs him, screaming that Kemet is trapped inside the tunnel they just fled. Horrified, Val demands to know where Kemet is and runs into the crumbling passageway, shouting Kemet's name as he tries to pry the rocks away. Pride warns Captain Allen that the area is collapsing, and he orders everyone else to evacuate first. Pride tells Arthur, Gil, that she is staying behind as well and entrusts her younger brother, Stale, to his care. Arthur shouts back, telling Pride she had better not let Lady Jean die. Inside the tunnel, Val leans against the heavy rockfall, exhausted and calling Kemet's name, but the way is completely blocked. This triggers a flashback for Val, who recalls his meeting with Pride 4 years ago. After he chose a contract of enslavement over execution simply because he didn't want to die, Pride gave him a few simple orders. Do no crime, do no violence, respect the royal family, and do not betray the country. With that, she told him to leave the castle, informing him that he was free to go. Val's memory continues, showing him visiting his old, dilapidated home in the low-class area a few years later. There, he found 2 small children living inside. Using the skills he learned from his time in human trafficking, he estimated their ages at 7 and 3. He watched as the older girl, Sifek, protectively hugged the younger boy, Kemet, while other children outside threw stones at them, a common cruelty that hadn't changed since he was a child. After Val scoffed at the scene, the 2 children began to follow him everywhere. No matter how much he tried to chase them off, they kept sticking to him. After 3 months, he grew used to them and eventually gave them their names, Kemet and Sifek, meaning 3 and 7 in a foreign language. His days became more troublesome, but the children slowly began to talk to him on their own. The flashback ends, returning to the present crisis in the collapsing cave. Val is digging frantically and sees Kemet's hand through a small opening. Sifek cries out for her brother. Val spots Kemet trapped in the tiny space and yells at him to stay exactly where he is. As the cave rumbles violently, a knight warns Captain Allen that the area is right next to a cliff and they could lose their footing at any second. A knight grabs Val, pleading for him to come with them to the exit, while Sifek also calls out his name. Val angrily throws the knight's arm off, yelling at them all to get off him and evacuate. He screams that he is a criminal, forced into a slavery contract for attacking the knight's order, and demands to know if they've forgotten that, yelling at them to just leave him alone. As Val pants, Pride steps forward and looks at him intently. She tells him not to separate them from himself. She then gives him a clear, formal order. Using his bare hands and his earth wall special ability, he is to separate them. Val understands her command. He turns, and as the cave crumbles, he pushes his hands into the rock. A massive wall of stone shoots up from the ground, sealing the passageway and protecting Pride, Sifek, and the knights from the final collapse. As the wall settles, Pride, now safe on the other side, simply says, "Thanks." The group is left to watch as the tunnel collapses completely behind the wall Val created, sealing his fate. Pride stands solemnly in the cavern, having made the difficult decision to leave Val's side. She knows she had no other choice, because she understood that Val would have preferred to be buried under the collapsing rubble with Kemet rather than fail to save him. As Pride, Stale, and the knights emerge from the cave, they are greeted by another group of knights. A female knight calls out to them, asking if Jean and Sir Arthur are unhurt. Before they can respond, Sifek runs up frantically and grabs the knight, demanding to know where Kemet and Val are. Sifek becomes hysterical with grief, and the knight tries to hold her back as she struggles. Sifek screams for Kemet and smacks the knight's hand away, telling them to let her go. Captain Allen then gently places a hand on Sifek's shoulder, calling her Jean, and begins to explain some mere speculation he has. He tells Pride to listen carefully, recounting that when the knights were retreating with Sifek, she resisted by spraying water at them. However, the water she used was incredibly weak, barely enough to fill a cup. Allen notes that this was nothing like the powerful blast of water she had used earlier, which was strong enough to knock away several men when she escaped with Kemet. He observes that ever since Sifek was separated from her brother, she has not been able to produce that powerful surge of water. Given her desperate personality, Allen finds it hard to believe she was simply going easy on the knights, leading him to conclude that Kemet's special ability must be related to her power. Understanding this new information, Pride immediately shouts for Val and commands the knights to take down the earthen wall at once. Pride and Stale rush back into the crumbling tunnel, surprising Val, who angrily demands to know why they came back. Pride sees Kemet's hand through the rubble and orders Val to reach out and take his hand now. Val grabs Kemet's hand, and Kemet confirms he has a grip. Val yells at Pride, questioning her plan and saying there is no way he can pull the boy out of such a tiny space. Pride cuts him off with a shout, reminding Val that she is his master and that she is commanding him. As Val stares in shock, Pride gives her final order. He is to follow her command, use his ability, and take control of everything in the cave.